Welcome. You are at the CCC at Western Roundup Living Sober.
Where there are, sorry, that was not a part of the script. Where there are no outside issues. My name's Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, a 7th year doctoral student in clinical psych, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
Yes, and I'm LouiLou, or Louis, however, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club. I'm in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. And each week we will provide and create a brave space where we can engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please like, share, ding that bell.
Ding, ding, ding. And now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we are just friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
I always get a kick out of that part because it's like so professional. So, I'm all, yes.
I try to mimic like the disclaimer. You ever hear like any disclaimer? There's always like that.
The one where like you can take this pill, but it says like really, really low. You're gonna die.
So for folks listening, we are at Western Roundup Living Sober. This is the first time that we've ever done a live podcast.
I know.
Well, in front of other people, a lot of other people.
And this is the last podcast of the season.
It is the last podcast of the season because we're going on break for the month of July.
Yeah.
So how are you?
I'm good. I'm really like, you know that energy that you get. I've only been here for like a day and a quarter or whatever, but the energy that get at conferences, like it's intense. It's like I feel like really good. I feel super spiritual.
Yeah, there's that's interesting because I have a lot of anxiety. So I don't know if it's like the buzz. There have certainly been moments at the conference where I felt very like connected. And just in general, I've felt also like uncomfortable. So at once grateful and uncomfortable.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So just for folks who are listening, the Western Roundup Living Sober is the longest standing LGBT plus conference in the world, possibly, definitely in the country. And it's been around for over 40 years. I forget, it was 1942, Adam? 1997. The AA didn't even exist in 1942. Yeah, but so it's been around for quite some time. It's been a big part of my recovery. It's like one of the first major like sober things I did in my first 30 days.
Yeah, no, I think that it definitely was my first conference, and I deal obviously the topic today with a lot of social anxiety, so it was an opportunity to kind of soldier through that.
The social anxiety?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think, for context, the reason why we chose social anxiety as the topic that we would do at the podcast is because when you're at a conference, at least for me, I used to use drinking and drugs to feel comfortable in social situations. And so now that I don't have drugs and alcohol, like when I'm in social situations, like my anxiety picks up really fast.
We have to find a different lubrication.
Yeah, different. God, Louis. And there goes our first sex comment. So that's why we thought about doing social anxiety as a topic at the conference. So I guess one way to start is my question to you is like, what has that felt like for you while you've been here?
Well, first I will say it's like, so I've been sober a little over 14 years, and I say that because I've had some time to attend conferences, retreats, and what have you. And so I think that, that idea of practice makes better or perfect. Mm-hmm. I'd say better.
Yeah.
So I've had the opportunity to do this more and get better at it. And early on, I didn't have tools. Or even if I had tools, I didn't know how to activate the tools. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't handle things as gracefully as I would like. I am a person now who sits before you with an understanding of, the things that kind of trigger me and my boundaries. And so I am able to kind of take care of myself in a way that I hadn't been able to before. Because believe it or not, even though I find myself in things that center me and make me, the center of attention a lot of times, I'm not always that comfortable with that kind of attention. And so I have to take care of myself a lot.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because
Okay.
do you feel, so folks might not know, but you also have an alter ego, Mini Happy Returns, right?
Many happy returns.
Do you
yes.
feel like you still experience that anxiety when you're Mini?
I
Can
do.
I tell you why I'm asking?
Well-
Well, because one of the things I've heard is that people, when they step into drag, they feel protected.
Oh yeah,
Right. And like they feel like they can live out this like different form.
Oh yeah, no. But I do at times, and if you ever want to know or witness it, it's like there are times when I move away and I have to get somewhere where my back is, where I don't have anything behind me, and I can kind of just shut down. And if I have my phone, I'm going to get on it, and it's okay. It's nothing wrong with it.
You know, that's it's interesting that you bring up the phones, because the other day I was talking to someone about meetings, and they had these very strong opinions about people being on their phones at meetings.
Yeah.
And I don't have as strong an opinion about it, because one of my thoughts is like, if someone is on their phone at a meeting, they're probably trying to like regulate themselves, right? Either like they're losing focus or they're feeling uncomfortable. And I'm like, as long as someone is sitting in a meeting, I don't care if they're like clipping their toenails.
Okay, the only time I have a problem with that, is like when you're sitting in the front row, because it is. I feel like that's a distraction. That's a distraction, and it's. I understand you might be trying to regulate, but it's for the speaker. And folks see you. I know that, like, if you think that might be a challenge, this is something you get to work through. You get to find a seat, maybe not in the front or maybe not in the back.
Interesting.
But somewhere, that's just my take, you know?
Yeah, I just didn't know you had an opinion about it.
Because I don't lose sleep over it. Let's have a podcast about using your phone in a meeting.
The other thing that comes up for me is like that there's there's the drag that we're familiar with, but I also think that there's like the drag of social situations, right? And so what I'm thinking of here is one of the experiences that I've had is when people are coming into the rooms for the first time, so they're counting 30 days, right? And what I notice is that a lot of time they'll bring in bar or club behavior.
Oh, God.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's like this kind of like very bitter way of interacting with each other, or there's like this big performance of like interacting with each other. And I've always thought of that as a form of drag, you know, like all the different ways that we try to hide or we try to communicate.
What's that fear? It's that fear, that insecurity. It's like, I mean, when I was in that scene, I showed up a certain way because, like, I'm going to get you before you get me.
Right.
I'm going to, or for me, when I was in my active addiction and when I was struggling, I had fear of abandonment that I didn't understand or address. And so I would act a certain way because I was afraid that you were going to turn your back on me or leave me. And so I decided I'm going to do it first.
It's interesting that you bring up fear of abandonment. The reason why I say that is because interpersonally, I think one of my strongest anxieties is fear of abandonment, you know, and like whatever way, and like, you know, my anxiety starts to pick up. And I don't think I realized that up until maybe the second ago, that I wonder if that's like what comes up for me in social situations, is like this idea that like I am somehow going to be kicked out from AA or like the conference or any social situation.
You know, something interesting, like, okay, so I don't suffer or struggle with it nearly as much, but it does kind of, affects how I am with people, because I think about how I was. And so I try to behave in such a way, and it ties back to being Minnie. Like, even if I'm feeling uncomfortable or whatever, I'm always on for people. Like, if someone comes to me, hey, I'm going to give it to you. And I think that is my higher power. It's like, I have a former sponsor who said, it's like, don't mistake God's grace for your personal strength. Those times when I am uncomfortable and I do it anyway, I realize that is when my higher power is kind of carrying me through. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the things I wrote was I miss alcohol, right? Like, and I think that, and I don't actually miss alcohol, but like one of the things I miss about drinking and using is like the ease that brought social situations.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't have any problem saying I do miss alcohol. I fantasize. I miss the times when I would just sip Pinot Noir or a certain thing, and it was classy, and we were having classy conversation.
Carlo Rossi.
It never. No, that was you and your box wine. It's like, don't even try it. I was classy. I was a fucking martini girl. 3 olives. Whoever I was flirting with would get one of them.
But so yeah, it was just making me think about like some of the reasons why I drank and use. Also, the being on is a very interesting idea.
Oh God, yeah. It's like, I think that like, oh man, it's like one of the gifts of doing the work now is that I don't have to be on all the time. But I think that I have one of those personalities, and this is the thing. Like, I always eat lunch at the CCC. You see what I did there? I always eat lunch, and when I'm there, folks will see me and they will automatically assume that I want to perform. No, perform.
What do you mean perform?
Well, because it's like I have a sense of humor. I'm quick-witted, whatever, and sometimes I'm on my phone, and like there was an instance just now. I had my earphones in that were connected to my phone, and an individual came over and, "Are you on the phone?" And I'm thinking, get the hell out of here. And it's, if I'm in this space, and I think we all experience this, it's like where folks don't understand boundaries. Like, I'm hiding in the corner, trying to have a moment. And I'm trying not to make eye contact because I know you're coming towards me. And I'm trying to also be nice but I will say, get the fuck away. Hello. It's like, maybe you need to hear that in the way you need to hear that. I feel like I may have gone off.
No. I mean, it's okay if you did. But what I'm thinking of is that being on feels like a form of people pleasing.
Oh God. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about like, there's just some days where like, I wonder, there's just some days where like I might be in a social situation and I'm questioning how I'm showing up to that social situation. Like for me, like I do have like default settings. Like my default settings is like one of them is to become hyper focused on the other person. Well, in general, I'm interested in people, and so I might be hyper focused on the other person.
When you say hyper focused, like
I'll explain. Okay. Yeah. At the expense of myself. Right. Okay. So it's no longer a conversation. I'm just like, basically like, I'm just 100% consumed with all things you, and I'm like really not contributing. Right. So on the face, I think it's fine, but like, I'm not in that situation. I'm like, I'm actually very far away from that situation. But I don't mean to suggest that like, if I'm talking to someone, I'm not present, but there are times where if I'm feeling particularly anxious, that like this is like one way that I cope is I just become like 100% fascinated in the other person.
I used to do that, like what you were saying. I don't know if I was hyper focused, but I used to do that where I would pay attention to you or whatever, but I would never give any of myself.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, so I would never, and so it would be interesting when I finally talk to somebody and tell them, "Oh, I have a sister," and I had no idea. Like, I was so guarded. I think what it was, I was so guarded. Like because I believe, and I know I've shared this on the podcast, like my 50 so odd years on this marble, as they put it. These, I worked hard to kind of get to this place, and you can't ever always give that to other people. Like, there's some people that don't know how to appreciate, what you have. Like it was in Take, it was for Color Girls, where she was talking. One of the prose or poems was somebody always almost walked it off with all my stuff, and basically my stuff is all of the things that make me, and I can't. Whether or not it's because I don't trust other people, or whether or not I trust me enough to kind of not I am not letting people have any of my stuff.
Yeah, I feel that. For folks listening, if you feel so inclined, you're welcome to step up to the mic to ask anything or comment. That being said, I think a lot about how the kind of, I shared about this at the sex and recovery meeting yesterday, about how like vulnerability is actually quite hard, and I feel like there are forms of vulnerability, especially in social situations. And that's like an interesting idea for me, because like I'm never really too sure how much to give. you know?
Absolutely.
Because when I was drinking and using, one of the ways I thought that you connected is like, I'm just literally, I've heard people say like, you give people your fourth and your fifth step. You know what I mean? Like you trauma bond, you meet someone and you're just like, oh, here are all the horrible things that have ever happened to me, you know? And
I don't trust. You know what?
That's the way I used to bond.
Yeah. No, but even like it was very rare. Like sometimes you meet a person where you connect, you have those moments or whatever, and it's fine. But for the most part, and especially now, if you give me too much too soon,
right,
I overload and I don't know how to come back from that. Like, because I think that, you know, it's a form of manipulation. Like you're going to tell me all this stuff. Why are you telling me this stuff? You know, state your business. Tell me what's happening. It's like with my sponsors, like I give things when it's time. Like I try not to give advice, but I simply, you know, try to share a story so that you know that I get it, you know, and also because it helps in that process of learning how to trust one another, you know, before you get to the real meat and potatoes. So it's like, I'm not going to give you it all because it all won't make sense. But if you give it when it's appropriate, and we get to determine when it's appropriate.
That's interesting. I think about when you say that when someone is like saying a lot in the very beginning that it's a form of manipulation. I wonder about that because on some end, I think whenever someone does something like that, I just think, oh, this person has never been allowed to have boundaries in their life. And so this is how they show up to social situations. It does feel like a red flag to me because I'm like, why you don't know me? Why are you trusting me with all of this? But I feel like those are new developments for me. You know, like when I was drinking and using, I think a lot of that had to do with like my relationship. I didn't, you know, like there were no boundaries in my family. Right. So everyone was always in your shit. And there was a way that like people had conversations about things that like, I think back and I'm like, I don't think as a kid I should have like overheard that conversation. Right. And so it's interesting because now this idea of like giving a piece of myself to someone or a social situation, that's new because at one point in my life, I didn't think I had something to give. And now it's like, in recovery, I'm like, I actually do have something to give. And then there's like fear around what you're going to do with this thing that I give you.
Exactly.
Right. And I think for me, at least when it comes to like social anxiety, I don't know if all of these things are like playing in the forefront or in the background of my mind. But they do feel situation specific. You know, there are definitely situations where I feel more comfortable. Like yesterday I was here with Adam and my sponsee and I think a newcomer, and we were here until 3:00 in the morning, like just talking right over in this room over here. And that felt very good to me, you know? And then there's also like, there's a certain like sharing at a meeting, right? There's something that may induce like a lot of fear in me, but I think this is where spirituality comes in for me, where I'm like, I feel like God put me here. I feel like what comes next is like all God given or God inspired.
Well, I think when it's natural or the spirit moves you, I mean, when the spirit moves me, I'm good. And all of my rules go out the window when the spirit moves me. So it's like, one of the things I was thinking is like, I am learning in advanced recovery. So when I am, and this happens more in the rooms, when I am approached or when I do experience someone who is oversharing or whatever, I don't automatically go to them trying to manipulate me because I am willing to give grace. Because I realize that folks coming in, they're doing the best that they can with what they know, what they have. I also think that it's important on my end because I understand my boundaries to lovingly find a way to kind of redirect the conversation. Whoa. Like I've said, I think you're giving me too much. I don't have the bandwidth. It's not that I'm not interested. Go talk to your sponsor.
Right. That's interesting. They brought that up at trauma-informed recovery. Did you go to that yesterday?
No, because I am not willing to deal with my trauma.
So the trauma-informed recovery meeting yesterday was a great meeting. There was 4 panelists, But one of the things that they were talking about ways of incorporating like trauma, to have trauma informed like interactions with people. And one of the things that was suggested was like, if you're talking to someone and they're like venting to you, that you can say like, hey, you know what, I actually can't do this right now, you know, or like, I don't have the bandwidth to do this right now. And I feel like in order to do something like that, that by itself, I think takes like an incredible amount of strength. And like, I'm just thinking about like just asking for what you need is really hard. And then also like one of the things that I'm learning, I spoke with my slaw sponsor before I came in today, because I was like having an issue with one of my character defects. And he says to me, you know, Anthony, like you typically call me about these kind of things when you're in a big social situation. And he's like, I don't think you give yourself enough breaks. You know, and I'm like, oh, wow. Like I'm kind of getting emotional thinking about it, because I'm like, why do I do that to myself? Like, why do I sometimes like push myself so much where like things get so painful and unbearable, right? Like, because in the end, like I am doing it to myself. So I think like where I'm trying to land with that is like, and it's a skill set. It's a skill to figure out what it is that you need.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it's fair to say like, okay, so. And I'm glad we were talking about trauma. Like with this idea of social anxiety, we bring all of this mess with us. And some of it is not, it's unrefined, as you will. And so I think that this practice of being gentle with yourself, I love what one of our fellows that says, you know, I'm going to love myself. I'm going to love that kid in me. I'm going to be gentle with me, because, you know, it's taken a while, and I still have a long ways to go to where I'm not, you know, I don't have moments. Like I used to go to conferences, and I loved the idea like I had a room I could go and hide. I would go and hide way too much. Like there's this conference down in Palm Springs, Fourth Dimension, and I tested myself because it was one of those situations where I was going to be around a lot of sexy menses or whatever. And every time I'd see pictures, there'd be all these hot guys in the pool and everything say, oh, everybody's welcome. And I didn't believe it. I'm all thinking, why aren't the other people in your pictures? And I would go and I would see people having a good time. And there was nobody telling me that any of the stuff that was rolling around my head. But I would go and hide, and I'd say, I'm having a moment. I'm watching TV. I'm doing whatever. And I don't know, it was good for what it was, but it's like, well, if you're going to keep doing this, you need to find a way to kind of break out of that.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a comment.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Samuel. It's really good to see you guys, and I'm really having a great time at this conference. And one of the things that that hit me when you guys are talking about the trauma and about social anxiety and stuff like that. And one thing that I struggle with right now is that the trauma that I feel, I'm very comfortable with it. And that's all I know. And my trauma, you know, just to share in general, I was abandoned by my mother. And then when I came out gay later in life, my father literally cut me off. And my father was literally my hero, because he still is, but he just doesn't talk to me anymore. But he literally was somebody that saved me when my mom left, and very close with my dad. But just that being gay somehow just wasn't right for him. And I'm a junior, so my dad's Samuel as well, so I kind of represent him. And one thing that I struggle with is that now that I'm out and I'm in the community, I am also afraid to get close to people, because that closeness that I felt with others, from my mother, from people that I care about, even when it comes to dating or platonic relationships, once I start feeling that closeness and it feels good, I'm so afraid of losing it, that trauma that I'm used to feeling, I'm still afraid I don't want to feel it. So I'm stuck in this limbo. So here at the conference, so I'm of service. So I do as much as I can to help. It's also that pleasing part. I want to please people, like you guys had touched on. But also, when I have a role here and I'm doing something, I could stay busy, and people say they could ask me for help there. They come and approach me. And so they can ask me things, or I could approach and say, hey, do you need anything? So I have a position or a spot. So therefore, it's like my way of controlling, well, I belong here. I have a purpose. But how do I get that in my life where when it's other people, like, hey, I'm important, I have a purpose, don't reject me. So that's just, I wanted to comment on that because you touched on a lot of things for that. And again, thank you for being here.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
A lot in there.
Yeah, and I relate to that in ways that I can't explain.
Absolutely.
I feel really grateful for what you contributed. So what comes up for me is
Go ahead. Well, no,
Yeah.
I'll say this really quickly, and then I'll let you. You said something that was really important, like you being a service, so that you can claim your spot. Like when I first came into the rooms, I believed that I was, that whole fraud thing, and I'm not supposed to be here. So I took commitments like greeter, because then that meant everybody had to say hi to me. And so I think a great way to deal with social anxiety is to be of service. I mean, because you are doing what you're doing, you're still in it, but you get to. It's kind of like it's a focus. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. So what I relate to is this idea of abandonment, right? So I've been in a relationship for like the last 3 months, and it's something that like comes up for me a lot, right? And one of the things that I know is like I do have a lot of trauma in my history. And for me, where I get kind of stuck is like sometimes I think about like I don't want to burden the people around me. Right. I don't want to bring my jealousy or my insecurity to you. And for the longest time, historically, what would happen is like if I was in a relationship where I was dating, I'd freak the fuck out and like I'd ask you 1,000,001 questions, and I would be so explosive. Right. So what I've started to do is like if I have a reaction or there's something that comes up, like the first thing that I've learned to do is I've learned to kind of hold that and take it to some place that's safe. And so for me, like that might be calling my sponsor, it might be taking it to therapy, The hardest part about what comes up for me when I think about what you're saying is like when it comes up for me, I feel so stuck. It feels so sticky and it's so painful. And I've started to take that to therapy, but like one of the things that I've been doing is like inner child work, like I've been, I hate like saying it because it feels so cheesy, but I know it's really helpful. It's like, there are times where like, I might be like in my room, like holding a pillow against my chest, and like, maybe I'm stop it. Maybe.
No. I try to stay on your thought. I realized something. It's like,
what?
We always dismiss the things that are going to be so good for us as cheesy.
Yeah.
And I think that's negative talk.
I know you're right. You're 100%. Like, I knew you were going to say that. You're 100% right, which is an illustration of my issues with my feelings. So, the point is that like, I've like started to do these things that, they're really hard, like, I was sharing at the Sex and Recovery meeting, like it was so much easier for me to like.
That wasn't Sex and Recovery. That's OnlyFans. No,
that's my other podcast. But like I was sharing at the Sex and Recovery meeting that like, in retrospect, it was so much easier for me to like get on an app and to like hook up, right? Like even if there was like a sense of rejection, that was easier because those feelings were familiar, right? What I'm realizing. And speaking about trauma and being comfortable with trauma, right? It's like in relationship now, what's really difficult for me, it's like, oh shit, like it's actually hard to tell someone you like care about them. Or it's hard to say like, hey, this thing makes me feel jealous or insecure, And like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it because it's so hard, It's like,
I love you.
Yeah, this is like so unexpected. What I'm relating to is that like being human can be very hard.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things about being human that's very hard is like actually loving, It's like being in relationship with each other.
Loving and letting people love you.
Yeah. And it's like the other part of that, I'm trying to snap out of it.
No, don't. This is like a truth serum.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Like I'm trying to land the plane and where I'm trying to land is like, and part of that is like the being gentle with yourself. Like we say that shit all the time, like, oh, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with yourself. And like, it's so subtle. And like, for me, the subtleness is like, and the way I preface that, like, oh, this feels so corny or it feels so cheesy. Like that's so subtle. Like it doesn't need to be there, know? So I relate, and I do think it's like, I think it's hard work. I think there are ways to address it. You know, like therapy's been helping. Being in like a loving, caring relationship is really helpful. You know, like sometimes like I'll let you comment. Like one of the things that I've shared before is like I used to have this supervisor. I worked at this hospital, and she said, you know, Anthony, not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Yeah. Not everyone gets to hold that. And I feel like that's something that I've learned. What I've learned is that I have to develop relationships that feel safe so that I can show up as my complete self, right? That's all I've got. Go ahead.
Well, really quickly. Yeah. So another part of being gentle with yourself is realizing where you are in this process. It's like if you're the beginning, as much as sometimes we get sober and we think, oh God, I want everything to be okay because now that I'm not drinking or using or whatever. But you can't walk 100 miles into the forest and all of a sudden turn around and be out of it. So you got to give yourself time to get better, to heal.
Thanks.
Hi.
Good morning. I'm Trevor. Going back to the sort of the oversharing part, I feel like oversharing for me was a trauma response, right? So I had poor boundaries because I didn't learn good boundaries when I was a child in my family. But I would go through these sort of situations where I would either completely shut myself off from folks because I just absolutely didn't feel safe. But if you offered me even just a little bit of what I considered to be love, I just started vomiting who I was, right? And that was a trauma response for me because it was like I never felt safe. And so if someone was helping me to feel safe, then I was going to, because I had poor boundaries, overshare. But that was also a form of manipulation for me because I was hostage taking in some way without consciously knowing what I was doing. I felt like this person was now they had to love me because I shared myself with them so much that they had to love me. You know, I used to hate myself so much, right? And I felt like I struggling with self-love and with feeling good enough are like some of the biggest things for me. And in the core of who I am, that I struggle with that feeling of not feeling worthy of love and of not being enough. And through doing the work and a lot of therapy and being very God conscious and really practicing the 11th step to the best of my ability one day at a time, I have found that insecurity, that social anxiety that I used to have was because I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like I belonged. And when I was able to sort of heal that with God and with therapy and with self-love, because for me, God is love, God is only love, as I began to love myself more, my anxiety dropped. My belief that I was worthy of love, that I truly have that intrinsic belief now that I am enough, I felt like I didn't have to be anxious around folks because guess what? I'm worthy of being here. I deserve to be here. And then that self-love turned into loving other folks, right? Not all the time. I'm not some spiritual hero. I'm a very flawed human being like everyone else. I think negative thoughts about folks sometimes. But if I'm not thinking negative thoughts about myself, I'm not thinking negative thoughts about other folks. And then that helps me to just feel more comfortable with who I am and then comfortable being myself around other people. So, I just kind of wanted to share that for me. I feel like if I'm anxious, it's because I'm ego-centered. And when I'm feeling peaceful, that's when I'm God-centered, right? And I've shared this before. That's when God can really show up in my life. And when I'm of service to other folks, that's when I get to be the man that God wants me to be. And that just makes me feel good about where I'm at. Thanks.
Wow,
Thank you. I love that. I love that. Okay. Joe, did you want to go? Did you want to comment? I did actually. You can, if you don't mind hanging out right there for a second. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. One of the things that you bring up for me is I feel like one of the best lessons I've learned recently is like when the horrible feeling comes up, like historically I've tried to run away from that feeling, right? And sometimes I did it with drinking and using, or sometimes it was porn, or sometimes it was a relationship, you know? And the one thing that I think the muscle that I've started to develop is like staying with the feeling, you know, like that shit is so hard. It's like staying with the feeling. And what I realize is like, that is how I cure my abandonment. Like, it's like, I can't abandon myself, you know, like when the feeling comes up. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's my relationship with my higher power that has gotten me to a place where I'm no longer freaked out about this idea of abandonment, because now that I'm not afraid to be with me, I mean, it's like, it's not like I'm so self-sufficient, but I think, what I heard and a practice that I'm trying to do now is not to personalize somebody else's humanity, not to make what you're going through about me. Cause I used to always make somebody else's thing about me. And that was what was triggering stuff in me. So if someone comes to me oversharing, I try to remind myself, you know, where are they at? What are they going through? And why? And this is not about me. Or I could say, this is about me, and of course you want to share everything with me because I'm so special. No. Sorry, I always with the levity, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Joe. This might be taking things, I don't know if this might be a tangent, but, an interesting, I never used to feel like I had any social anxiety. And, I lived here for 25 years. I worked in an office. I went to in-person meetings and felt like I was constantly interacting with everyone except when I went home to sleep and shower. And during the pandemic, everything changed. I moved away. I moved to Palm Springs, started working out from my house, and, we were in lockdown. And, for probably a year, I had only interactions with some very close friends, physical interactions. I mean, there was Zoom and work meetings and, and I've sort of felt like it's been a little hard to get back into life, and, I do go to some in-person meetings, more now, and I'm trying to kind of expand my social circle where I live, but it's harder than it used to be for me. And, and coming up here to the conference, which, I'm really glad I did. But it was funny because like Friday, I went to the big meeting and I really hadn't done much during the day. And then people were like, somebody was like, well, aren't you going to go to bingo or the dance? And I'm like, no, I can't. I just was like it was too much. Mm-hmm. And now yesterday I did a very full day here, but, I guess I'm just curious if other people have had like this experience with the pandemic and what that kind of did for us with social anxiety. And
I've witnessed other people experience it, but I was unfortunate enough to I work at Cliffs in the Castro, and so I was always out. I was an essential worker, essentially, but I had to get to a point where I realized, because at first I was judging others for not reacclimating as fast, but it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. That's a collective trauma that we all experienced, and I'm gonna turn to you because I just see the little.
Well, I was just thinking, like, thank you for that. I was just thinking about other people I know who feel the same way as you do. Like there's certainly, I'm not saying this applies to you, but I know there's still a lot of, I know a few people who have like a lot of fear post the pandemic, and then also the pandemic itself. So many people relapsed during the pandemic. The pandemic fucked up a lot of lives, I think the reintegration thing, I had a very different experience because before the pandemic, my program was like falling apart, and then because during the pandemic, folks who were affiliated with the conference, they created a meeting and it was online and it became this community, right? And that started to give me like a sense of what it could feel like to be in community with other people. And so in a way, like it was kind of like the baby steps for me to be back in social situations, but I think this kind of goes back to like what I was saying earlier about my sponsor suggestion, which is like, Anthony, I don't think you give yourself enough breaks, because I feel like you can be social, but being social can look different to everyone, like I went to like my first music festival sober, like a couple weeks ago. And I was like I think I was just there for too long because like for the following few days, like I was like reeling. It was just too much. And it's like, okay, I guess maybe if I do something like that, maybe I shouldn't be there for like 6 hours,
The other thing is like, some days all I can do is not drink, all that other stuff. And that has to be enough. And so like you were saying, it's like you went to the meeting and that was enough and anymore. And I think that no matter how much time you have, it's like being patient with yourself. I mean, it's like we got to go back to that piece. Like, there's so many factors that, when I think about my anxiety, like I shut down over talk about politics, over talk about religion, over talk about everything that's going on. And we got there's a big smorgasbord of bullshit that we're constantly having to field. And so anxiety, it's understandable that we're experiencing anxiety. I think it's interesting. It is helpful to know that I'm not the only one experiencing this. Because I get to get over my cheap self. Thank you, Miss Billy.
Thank you for labeling that collective trauma.
Yeah.
Because I haven't really heard that said. And that's how I felt about it. And yes, I had an online community too, and I still have some of that, and that's wonderful. But, the in-person interactions, sometimes that's still, and, some days my getting out of the house is getting in the car and going to CVS,
Right.
And other days it's a meeting. I try to do something every day that I get out of the house, but some days it's not easy.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I was thinking, so we have 10 minutes left. So I was thinking about something Billy says.
Yes.
The thing that he puts in his gratitude list, like everyone's
Our
doing their
executive
best.
director, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's doing their best. I think that's like there's two things that I'm thinking of. One is when I'm in one of the meditation practices that I have is when I'm feeling anxious in a social situation. What I try to do is I try to think about people being heartbroken, right? Like being heartbroken is an experience that everyone has had, either because there's a loss or because there's just anything. We're all going to be heartbroken. It's unavoidable. And when I think about that, when I think about like this person in front of me has the capacity to be heartbroken, they've been heartbroken before. If I think about, and so basically what happens for me when I do that is like I soften. And I think the reason why I soften is because I realize like, we're really all just doing our best, like we're really all just like being humans, doing the life thing as best as we can. And when I can get myself into that headspace, there's no room for me to not feel good enough, because good enough for me is like, a lot of times it's like I'm creating some random comparison in my head, or it's some variable,
Yeah.
The last thing I'll share about that is it was like I've shared before where I went to this meditation meeting not too far from here, and I was like listening to all these people share, and I was just thinking to myself like, oh my God, all of these people are creating their own problems. Like I don't see why. And then I was sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, Anthony, you're such a hypocrite. Like I went there with like my own problems. You know what I mean? And but as I was listening to everyone's problems, I'm like, oh my God, if they would just get out of their own way, like if they would just stop struggling, if they would just stop fighting. And, like I was speaking to myself.
Well, it speaks to the idea of my sick mind can't heal my sick mind.
Right.
And that's why we come together, so that you open your mouth and say, oh, you create your own problems too, huh?
Yeah. It's like, my sponsor says you can't go to the problem looking for the solution, and the problem centered in the mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was there something else you were going to say?
No. I was thinking earlier, it's like I always feel like when we get together, I just always feel like I want to protect this one. No, it's like, that's my people pleasing, but I absolutely adore you. I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you. I think the last thing, well, maybe not the last thing, but the thing that we typically always come back to is like and God, right? And I
absolutely.
I think one of the things that I've had to learn in relationship, be it romantic or platonic relationships, is that, and I was actually telling Adam this yesterday, is that the goal for me is to, in all of my relationships, be it with like the person I'm seeing or with my friends, is like to have a sense of safety and security where nothing can penetrate. You know what I mean? Like where there's just like a safety, where there's no room for me to feel intimidated. There's no room for me to compare, because there's like a sense of safety here.
Absolutely.
Right. And I feel like the way that on my best days, I feel like the way that I achieve that sense of safety is by finding the common denominators. I mean, it even goes back to like looking for the similarities rather than the differences.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we're really fortunate. And I talk about this a lot, like, in the rooms, if 12-step is the direction you go in, we have this built-in mechanism to develop these relationships, to have these connections, and then most of us are here for the same reason, and we're willing to get to be a little more open, like something that you couldn't get at the bars or whatever, and you get to decide how much deeper you're going to take it. And for me, I heard someone say that I can only have so many close relationships as I'm willing to nurture. And so maybe 5 on this hand, as you know. But I feel like it's an embarrassment of riches, mainly because of all the work that I've done. Like I have a lot of folks that I can go to and talk about. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I always say it's like it does, I have my close circle that I will talk about things, my sponsor, and whatever that I'm uncomfortable with, but I will speak ad nauseum and work through it and get right with it so that the things that pass my mouth, I determine my narrative because I work through it and I tell my story. Anyway.
Thank you, Louis.
I know. Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you. You know what I just realized?
What?
We don't have the closing script. Do you have it? Okay.
We actually do. You have to press that. And it's like,
Yeah. Also, I just want to thank the folks who came up.
I know. Thank you so much. This is wild because normally we're Brandon will press it and then the words will pop up and we'll be all excited and so happy that people are actually listening to us.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
Do you want to start?
Well,
any final words?
No, it's like, well, if you've never been to the Castro Country Club, the Castro Country Club is located in the heart of the Castro district, and we're gonna actually you're reading. I was ignore me. Go ahead. I can't find this.
What do we do? I think we touch this and then we do. Okay.
We're really helpless. Okay.
Our goal is to be as unprofessional as possible.
Exactly. So the Castro Country Club is.
Can we read this first?
Oh, to find more information about Western. Oh, you threw us off.
Okay.
To find more information about the Western Roundup Living Sober Conference, go to livingsober.org.
Very good. The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and we're going to start over. The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all of the ways to contact us at www.castrocountryclub.org. Is it podcast? I always do podcast.
Tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
And find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yay, thank you guys.
Yes. Are you still recording?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So what we usually do is and this is bonus information for the podcast. Normally we go live, we video, but we usually continue the conversation like we're going to do now after. And so if you go, you can only catch this if you go to places where you listen. That was cool.
We have a debriefing 15 minutes on the podcast. It's podcast exclusive.
This was our first time. We've had a few people in the audience before, and this was wild.
Yeah, it was wild.
It's nice to have somebody come up to the mic and kind of because honestly, when I send you a text and I'm trying to be all expressive and everything, you don't know what. That's how most fights start.
Being expressive via text. Yeah, I feel a text message is not the best place to have most conversations. Yeah.
How are you feeling? You still feeling emotional?
I'm probably gonna have a good cry later.
You know what it's like, and I was trying to I was trying to respect that and kind of honor what you're going through because I'm always I was listening, I was thinking, oh, I got some snide remark here. I don't know. It's as much as I want to believe that Minnie and Louis are two separate people,
they're not. They're not.
But I am a nice person, whether or not you believe it or not.
No, you're very
no.
Yeah. Yeah, so a big thank. I know I think the schedule has us until 11:45. So thank you everyone for staying. We're going to continue on our conversation, but you don't have to like sit for that. Yeah, I think I feel. I feel like really tender, you know.
Wonderful.
It's yeah.
You know, maybe we could talk about like, and I know we've kind of alluded to some ways that folks can kind of, is combat the right word? Like, especially if you're a newcomer and you wanted to come to conferences, but you're just uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't like to not combat like social anxiety, but like make coping with social anxiety.
Yeah, coping. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
He's pretty too, but it's like, it's okay.
Well, you were talking about like ways to cope with anxiety.
Yeah, ways to cope with. I mean, we already had the taking on commitments, you know, what have you.
Oh yeah, you're saying like practical.
Yeah, practical, exactly.
I think like one of the ideas, well, I feel like just rest is a really big part. I think like just baseline stuff is like the hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You know, it's like baseline. I think also like having an exit strategy.
Oh yeah,
is also really important. Having people that you can check in with.
Your circle of wisdom. As like a gift has always been like when I get to go to these things with my sponsor, because there have been a number of times where, you know, the first time actually I was on this committee. I was a chair for a committee for this retreat that we go on, and people were not acting the way I wanted them to act, and it was not going well, and I was not having a good time, and I had the wherewithal, or at least my higher power pushed me in the right direction, and I was able to process it through and end up having a good weekend. But yeah, it's struggle is real.
The struggle is real. I think I'm done.
I know exactly. Yeah. We have squeezed enough blood out of this rock.
All right.
So thank you again for joining us, and I had an amazing weekend.
Me too.
I get to go to work now.
I want to stop recording.
Pressure. Fabulous.